Yes.
Then you are as barbaric as them.
Well, we're not as barbaric
you are
as
as barbaric
them.
as
Of course
them.
we're not. What? Because we don't do the exact Islamic
And you
burial.
think
We're
you're
as
better,
barbaric.
you're no better.
It's as if we'd flown planes
You're
into
no
buildings.
better.
This is
You
moral
are no
relativism
better.
gone mad. It's worse than moral relativism. It's an inversion of morality.
You can't choose your morality. Bits. You can't choose bits of it.
Well, you do.
I don't.
You do,
I
and you
live by the-
decide to apply moral norms to societies that you dislike, which you wouldn't apply to others.
I'm critical of all people who behave barbarically.
And some worse,
We are
some
not
more than
better.
others, yes.
No, it's
some
not
worse
true.
than others.
Welcome to Douglas Murray Speaks, where we showcase the best of Douglas Murray spitting facts and taking names. It's 2011. Osama bin Laden has just been shot and killed by U.S. Navy SEALs in Pakistan. The death of the orchestrator of 9/11, responsible for the senseless killing of 3,000 innocent souls. A time for celebration, surely. Not for a certain segment of people in the West, such as the Muslim lady on the panel, who claim they stand for universal principles, but are noticeably quick to denounce any aggression by the West and suspiciously slow to denounce similar or worse aggression by our Muslim enemies. Luckily, Douglas is too sharp-witted to be taken in by such hypocrisy.
I'm elated by the death of Osama bin Laden, as I think any decent person should be. The issue of whether or not he was armed is, I mean, obviously Yasmin is an expert in these kind of operations, but if you are one of the military,
He wasn't
if you
armed.
are one of them, if you, I can continue, if
wasn't
you're one
armed.
of the military personnel in the compound in that situation, you don't know whether he's got a suicide vest. You don't know whether he's going to pull another bomb. And let's get on to the other issues. Firstly, this idea that he could be tried. How can you try Osama bin Laden? Where? When? How do you find a jury that doesn't have opinions about him? How do you find a judge? If anyone's been following the attempts to have a trial of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in New York, it's proving to be a very, very difficult process, indeed very nearly an impossible one, which is why President Obama has now gone to a military tribunal for that. I think this doesn't demean America. It reminds people of who has been right in this conflict, who the victim is, and who the perpetrator is. Osama bin Laden did not allow any of the 3,000 people in New York and Washington on 9/11 any rights. He took away every single right that any of the people in those cars or their families had. He didn't grant any rights to the families or the victims of the 7/7 subway and bus bombings, which he inspired. It went on, and it's a good thing that the story has now finished.
Back to Douglas in a sec. Douglas is spot on here. Politics is the art of the possible. It's very easy for pundits to sit around a table and discuss what should be done. But if it has no connection to real-world conditions on the ground, then it's all just hot air. Was the U.S. supposed to treat bin Laden as if he were a U.S. citizen with the rights afforded him by the Constitution? Or as a psychopathic terrorist who spent his entire life attacking individual human rights and everything the West stands for? Next, Douglas takes on another bleeding heart liberal who prefers virtue signaling over dealing with reality.
I've spent most of my early life fighting terrorism. I've lost friends. I've seen them die in front of me from terrorists. Please don't accuse me of being naive in this. I can just tell you that when you take force, you take it in support of the rule of law, not to overturn the rule of law.
If I just address this issue of whether or not it was an arrest. It was military forces that were sent into that compound, and soldiers are trained to fight. And they're trained to shoot and to kill. And if this had been a police operation, then we would have sent police in. America would have sent police in. Pakistan would have sent some police into the building. But it was Osama bin Laden. They knew it wasn't a police operation. It was an army operation. And in an army operation like that, it's very likely that shooting is going to occur, as it did from both sides, apparently, and that somebody's going to get killed. But I just want this absurdity of all the time of treating people who have broken every single aspect of the rule of law, who then, when they're killed, suddenly all of these people come out and say the rule of law must be applied to Osama bin Laden. We have to remember who the victim is and who the perpetrator is in it.
Back to Douglas shortly. Douglas is absolutely correct here. Bin Laden was not holed up in an area controlled by the U.S. He was in hostile territory. Therefore, the only possible response was to send in special forces and take him out. Should the U.S. have waited for Pakistan, its so-called ally, to send in the police, arrested him, and carted him down to the local station for questioning and one phone call, presumably to ask for a favor from the nearest suicide bomber? Next, Douglas takes aim at the political talking shop that is the International Court of Justice.
You saw the Milosevic trial. When Milosevic was on trial, it went on for years and years. He stalled and stalled, and he died whilst the trial was ongoing. Now, I'm not saying that executing bin Laden in this circumstance is ideal, and I don't think that trying Milosevic in that case is ideal.
I'm sorry, the law is difficult, but it's the law, and we should be following it.
But this is an evolving body of law. You think it's law?
So hang on a second. What are you saying? We should not have the due process of law followed because it happens to be uncomfortable.
International law is an evolving body of law. It's not a rigid set of constructs like you
does
pretend
not allow,
it is.
It does not allow nations to go
and the Nuremberg precedent is not a valid one. There were all sorts of problems with the Nuremberg tribunals. That's recognised by lawyers now, and it's recognised by historians. We didn't also have an opportunity then to try Adolf Hitler. There are all sorts of problems. Paddy, if you just allow me to finish. There are all sorts of problems with trying somebody like Osama bin Laden, and there are all sorts of problems with capturing him alive.
We'll be returning to Douglas soon. As Douglas rightly points out, the idea that there is, in any sense, a well-defined, clear-cut set of international laws is nonsense. Law, by its nature, is intranational, decided and agreed upon by the common citizenry of a particular country. Should bin Laden have been tried? Would it have been worth the immense expense and potential martyrdom he may have gained? Next, Douglas clashes yet again with his Muslim opponent, as she supports bin Laden's every right being honored, even after death.
The rules of war say, and Paddy can, I don't know, confirm or deny this, that even when people are killed in battle, their bodies are given to families to bury properly. This did not happen. Right. He's no friend of mine, but they should have done that.
That's ridiculous. Yasmin says about, we must show, as it were, our principles. We must show that we're better than them. We are better than Al-Qaeda. We don't have to show that, Yasmin.
No, you do.
Hang on. Yasmin, just wait a second. But the point is what Yasmin is doing, and what many people are doing at the moment, is holding America and our allies to such a uniquely high standard that no society could ever live up to it. That even the worst enemy of a society has to be buried according to the customs that they would want. I can't raise it in me, Yasmin, to think that whether or not the customs around his burial were perfect in your eyes is the most important thing in the bin Laden story.
Back to Douglas right away. Douglas hits the nail on the head here. This need to constantly show that we are worthy in the eyes of the enemy is downright perverse. Our enemies hate us no matter how nicely we treat them, and in fact, view our kindness as weakness. Why do certain sections of our society have such little confidence in the goodness of the West compared to our enemies? Will they only be satisfied if the West is destroyed once and for all? Next, we discover just how out of touch the liberal elite are when it comes to the nature of the enemy we're facing.
I think that the moderates in that great moderate religion, tolerant religion of Islam, tolerance lies at the heart of Islam. They are beginning to win control of their own religion. And by the way, as Christians, we should recognize that we've had them too. I mean, I don't have to go to Baghdad to hear a preacher preaching death. I could have gone to Belfast a few years ago, and I come from that city. So let's not just remember that we don't have a few problems of our own. This thing will be won when, in due course, as I think is now happening, the Enlightenment comes to Islam. And that's the most important thing. The Arab Spring is far more important than the death of Osama bin Laden.
Very, very brief.
The idea that, as it were, this will make things worse is nonsense. If by killing terrorists you create terrorism, then what can you do but sit back and take it? And it doesn't strike me that this group needed reasons to be angry with us. They were already angry enough. It wasn't as if killing their leader is going to make them behave worse. They weren't moderate towards America on 9/11.
In hindsight, we can see just how absurd the liberal elite's grand ideals are. The Arab Spring led not to some Muslim enlightenment, but quite the opposite, an even greater outpouring of Islamic extremism and barbarism. As Douglas states, some enemies are beyond enlightenment and must be sent to the darkness to which they belong. If you enjoyed this look into the mind of Douglas Murray, please hit the like button. Give us your thoughts on the issue discussed in this video in the comments. And for more Murray content coming soon, don't forget to subscribe.